Record the meeting. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, or morning, actually, in California. I sit here in Denver. My name is Corey Edwards. I am the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Mainstay, and I will be your tour guide for today's informational webinar about the statewide chatbot initiative in California. So I want to start with a couple of housekeeping items, and then we will get to introductions and welcome. But we will be recording this meeting, so we'll have the ability to share this with those who are unable to attend. And we will have a couple of points today where we will jump out of the presentation and go to a Q&A, one midway and one at the end. So you will have the ability to submit questions using the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. So get your questions ready and queued up as you go through the webinar. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Marlene Garcia, the Executive Director of CSAC, to get us started.
Thank you very much, Corey. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the AI K-12 Chatbot webinar. We really appreciate you taking the time to join this discussion about an exciting new initiative that brings AI technology to high school students via texting to help them navigate completion of their financial aid forms. As mentioned, I'm Marlene Garcia, the Executive Director of the Student Aid Commission and an early sponsor of this significant opportunity because of the potential we believe this has for helping our students navigate what has become a complex college-going process. We are delighted that so many of you are here to join us this morning. For example, we have 19 superintendents, 40 school staff, 32 school districts are represented from across the state, and a total of 22 counties out of the 58 counties are also represented. So we have a really strong representation of the state, both north, central, south, urban, rural, and so we're really grateful to have you on this call. You have each been invited to participate in this webinar because you have a reputation for leading change in your districts and are always exploring new ways to serve students as effectively as possible. In the course of the past year, Salvia Senor and I, along with Corey Edwards from Mainstay, have met with many of you to talk about this opportunity. And to our delight, you have been unafraid and open to learning more about how AI can help prepare your students for college and financial aid. And you also express a readiness to embrace a technology that you know will become a central part of all of our lives in the very near future, if not now. You also have the courage to be on the ground level in figuring out how to make an AI chatbot work for students and families in a safe and controlled way. And you'll hear in a moment how we have really taken great strides in trying to protect everyone's privacy and security when participating in this effort. So why did the California Student Aid Commission embark on this journey? Well, about a year ago, I met with representatives from Mainstay, the company that has developed this two-way behavioral intelligent chatbot that assists students in achieving their educational milestones. I took a great interest in this company because I had heard about an amazing pilot they launched in collaboration with Common App, whereby they invited 500,000 low-income first-generation students to work with an AI chatbot named Ollie to help them navigate the college-going process. Very quickly, Ollie became a friend and a trusted advisor to these students. And when it was time for Ollie to move on to the next cohort of students, the love for Ollie went viral. Students praised Ollie and asked questions like, what do you do when a chatbot breaks up with you? They found Ollie so helpful in the process, and it was just-in-time information that they needed because they had 24/7 access. So having worked at Apple just prior to coming to the California Student Aid Commission, I've been very intrigued in this technology and this particular use case of how an AI platform can drive positive behavioral change in students. And of course, in my case, I'm very interested in looking at an AI chatbot that will help students complete their FAFSAs or their California DREAM Act application, which you all know is not an easy feat, especially for our lowest income first generation students. And now with the universal requirement that all districts are required to verify that their high school students have completed a FAFSA or CADA, We know that counselors and educators will carry the brunt of that responsibility in helping their students complete these forms. So this is a perfect time to look at how a sophisticated AI chatbot, like the chatbot we're talking about today, can help counselors, educators on the ground ensure that every student has support. So there started our journey to the California chatbot we have now named it Kali, depending on how you want to call it. It's a chatbot that we think resonates with students for a variety of cultural and musical. There's a rap song called Kali, to help high school seniors who opt into the program to access this significant assistance to help them with their financial aid. And this past year has been a year full of planning. So today, you will hear from mainstay leaders who will explain how Kali works and why this is such an important first step in leveraging AI technology for achieving intentional educational outcomes. Importantly, you are going to hear from our friend Mike McCormick, Superintendent of Verde Unified School District, who did not hesitate to join as an early adopter and noted that it is time for us to seriously explore these technologies on our campuses. Mike has further taken a real leadership role in this effort by carrying the master services agreement that will allow any of you today to piggyback on if you're interested in participating. And Mike and the Val Verde Unified School District have stepped up to co-sponsor this statewide initiative with the California Student Aid Commission. So we're so grateful for his participation and leadership. You will also hear from Gretchen Shipley, a greatly respected legal California student data privacy issues and works with the F3 law firm. Most of you know her and really rely on her to help navigate this very complex and changing world of student data privacy, and especially with the onset of new technologies like AI. Gretchen has ensured that the AI pilot is in full compliance with all state and federal student data protection laws and regulations, and she has crafted the master services agreement that was adopted by Val Verde to reflect these protections, terms and conditions that first and foremost protect students and also protect school districts from unintended consequences. The entire team will be available to answer your questions that you may have about this important work. So next, I'd like to welcome Salvia Senor, a longtime K-12 government and policy expert without whom we could not have gotten this project off the ground. He is a trusted partner to many of you and certainly to us, and who has helped develop a strategic plan to gain the support of the key leaders like yourselves on this call who would become instrumental in moving this project forward. So please welcome Salvia Senor.
Thank you, Marlene. I simply wanted to take this opportunity to share with you my strong feelings of appreciation for the superintendents in particular that have joined us on this call. This is a particular challenging time of the school year because it's the beginning of the school year. So your time is extremely important to be used as effectively as possible. And I greatly appreciate you taking the time to come and join us in today's webinar. And I know that those of you that are on this call are the superintendents that truly believe in efforts that help improve academic achievement through support. And so welcome. Anything that we can do to help move along this process, we're here to help you. Now, let me turn this over to Corey Edwards, Vice President of Mainstay.
Thank you, Sal. Thank you, Marlene. My role now is just to give you a quick high-level overview of who Mainstay is. And through this past year working with Marlene, she has done a fantastic job of telling you who we are. So I will keep this brief and just give you some highlights. But what we do simply is we design and deploy scalable text messaging strategies for state agencies and their institutions of higher education. And this is meant to proactively engage and motivate students to take action on the things that we know lead to success, particularly with support for initiatives like the financial aid initiative that we're doing in the state of California, but we also support recruitment, enrollment, retention, and academics, even classroom support. Right now, as a company, we currently support more than 250 partners across the country, and we've reached more than 7 million learners and exchanged more than 400 million messages. Our partners include some notable California partners like the University of California system. We work with university systems across the country. We work with institutions of higher education. We work with other state partners as well. Shown here is the Washington Student Achievement Council. We work with the state of Texas on statewide initiatives as well. And we've proven our impact at scale every step of the way through rigorous research, which we'll touch on a little bit later when Julie gets a chance to speak about why this works. And we believe in deep technical integrations in a platform that's able to empower a team of one or scale to meet the demands of a large enterprise. Now, to the project in specific, the purpose of this partnership is to maximize the number of high school seniors who complete financial aid applications. Our first year of this fully funded project will support high school seniors, particularly at Title I high schools. And Marlene referenced this earlier, working with those low-income students as they complete their financial aid applications. We are doing this, launching this as a 3-year pilot. In year 1, we're looking to serve up to 150,000 high school seniors across the state in selected districts that we've invited to this particular phone call. And we have different roles for the partners that have come to the table here. CSAC, for instance, will be our subject matter expert with all things financial aid. They're the chief promoter of this initiative and the executive sponsor of the initiative. The school districts like Verde on this call have committed to providing access to those students so we can help them along the way, giving us a primary point of contact so our mainstay team can work with that person, and staff the human escalation. So if the chatbot gets to a point where it needs to send the student to a human, identifying that pathway of which human that we need to talk to. And so what's next for this initiative is we're getting close to the go live, which October 1st is when the financial aid period usually opens. This year, we know that it's going to be delayed until the end of the year, early next year. So we want to make sure that we're beginning to build awareness about this bot and help students with things like setting up their FSA ID. So now at this point, I'd like to introduce and hand off to Gretchen Shipley, who's partner at F3 Law Firm, who will give you an overview of important partnership details that are likely top of mind for you. Gretchen.
Thank you, Corey, and thank you, CSAC and the whole team in Verde, who reached out to F3 Law to support this effort. As you can imagine, there may be a lot of questions, maybe from your CBOs, your CTOs, your parent community, when their students start receiving text messages from a chatbot. And so it was really important to us at F3 Law to make sure that we crafted an agreement that would protect school districts. So the way that this was configured, and I want to provide you all sort of with an overview of what the agreement looks like that your district could be entering into and what key provisions we put in there. And it's outlined in this agreement, in this webinar PowerPoint, but if you have follow-up questions, please do not hesitate to reach out and ask, because this was a labor of love. It's something we spent months and months on. So there's a lot more deep dive I could do today, but I don't want to bore you with all that. So I'm just going to really hit the highlights, but again, happy to answer any questions. So the one thing I wanted to mention, actually, Corey, can you back up one slide so I can kind of paint the big picture, is what we did is I entered into an agreement specifically with Verde as a school district, because I wanted, what I was seeking to do is protect school districts' interests in this arrangement. It's a little hard when you're the attorney, both for the state of California, CSAC, or for Mainstay, but it's Valverde's interest we wanted to protect, because this is set up as what you would call a piggyback agreement. So Verde entered into a master services agreement with Mainstay, and we set it up so that other school districts could simply sign off on an order form, one-page order form, and enter into the same terms and conditions. So the way it's configured, big picture, there's a master services agreement and there's component parts of that. One's a data privacy agreement, which is that statewide data privacy agreement many of you are probably familiar with, that F3 helped draft. They've signed that. The other key piece is the order form I just mentioned. We also have something that is a sample parent consent form. And that was the one on the next slide, Corey, that I wanted to share with the group. So what's unlike most software you use, we're recommending that school districts get affirmative parental consent and opt-in. The reason is most software you use under FAFSA is very limited to that student's individual educational purpose. Any information they provide to your software, you don't need advanced parental consent when it is just limited to that student's individualized education. What's different about a chatbot is it's just FAFSA-based content, but it can populate the chatbot's knowledge base for the benefit of all of these school districts. So it does expand a little bit beyond what FERPA would normally permit you to do without parental consent. The solution is you simply just need parental consent, or if a student's over 18, these are all seniors, college-bound seniors, they can consent for themselves. So this is a sample parental consent. You can reconfigure it for your district. It can be done digitally. But this was we wanted to provide the key language so that you all knew that we prefer and recommend an actual consent opt-in model here, rather than the school district pushing out a chatbot to each one of your students' cell phones without, parental permission. Especially, I don't know that you maintain all of your students' cell phone numbers. So I'm going to walk through some key pieces of this consent form, but this first slide is just to explain what the model is. You can see in the lines before that at some point the student will have to provide their cell phone number and possibly their counselor's name, as we'll talk about in a minute, for escalation reasons. So on the next slide, I just wanted to, this is where really the school district legal part comes in, is that we have the pieces we've highlighted here. The second box is really focusing that you would have parents expressly signing off on saying that they're not going to hold the district responsible for any sort of damages that might arise. I believe Marlene at the beginning said that there was hurt feelings when the chatbot broke up with them. Okay, we don't need anybody saying they had emotional distress over their relationship with their chatbot or anything. So we tried to really put some protective language in here that parents would expressly sign off on, that they're not going to come back and bring a claim against the district based on the chatbot. Or for example, they failed to complete the FAFSA and that the chatbot should have, somehow done it for them. So again, that's a really critical legal piece. And then on the next slide, we just highlight, the next one is collection of students' information. One thing that is a little bit unique and why we want parent permission here too is we are asking for parents to consent that the FAFSA completion status also be shared with the Student Aid Commission. They're not typically a party to this agreement, but we won't know if CALI is effective unless the Student Aid Commission knows how many people have actually completed those FAFSA applications. So Mainstay, the software provider, and Student Aid Commission would have access to that information, and parents are signing up on it and approving that. So that's the big piece of the oh, there's one more piece on the next slide that I want to share with you that is here in the parent consent form. Oh, sorry, no, actually it's in the order form. This is another document. It is the FAFSA limitations. Here we go. The order form is, this is the, very brief order form you would fill out as the piggyback agreement. And this is just a little excerpt of it that I wanted to share with you all, that it's really clear in here that one concern, two things were achieved in this language. The first one was we limited the chatbot, or we requested that Mainstay limit the chatbot to communications related to the FAFSA. We were concerned about open-ended discussions with students through the chatbot and how that could raise issues with parents and students. So we've asked Mainstay through this agreement that it be FAFSA-related communications. And if students ask questions, and I know Corey and Mainstay can elaborate on this, but if they ask questions that are outside the scope of FAFSA, there's an escalation protocol. And the big concern we had was, well, let's say it's off topic. It may be like, I'm interested in this college. What's the annual tuition? that may be something that has to go to a school counselor. And so you may have seen on the previous slide with the consent form, we asked them to provide their school counselor's information. But another piece that CSAC and many people will express concern about is, well, what if this chatbot, what if a student expresses suicidal ideation to a chatbot? What kind of liability does the district have, or Mainstay, or CSAC, or anybody? And so there was a concern about what, or a threat against the school. So, you know, a couple ways we address that. One is we had the parents sign off in the consent form that they're not going to hold the school liable, or they can't, and that would be your defense that the district isn't responsible for any damages. But the other component that we put in this order form is that the school district will provide escalation contact information to Mainstay, so that if something is, a message is received that is dangerous, you all have threat escalation protocols already for your existing software, your monitoring software. So you may have a threat assessment team. You may have an agreement with your local law enforcement. It may go to a school counselor. Whatever your escalation process is, we're just requesting that you share it with Mainstay so that there's a process in place in case a student were to ever put any sort of threatening language in there, because that's obviously a big area of potential legal liability anytime a student is communicating on any of your software programs. So we put that protection measure place in there. And I already previously mentioned the data privacy protections. So here's the part I want to talk about, is the procurement process. That's a big part of what I do as well. Is, you know, do you have to put out an RFP? Do you have to go out and bid? Do you have to do anything like that? No, in California, if you can piggyback off of other agreements that other public agencies entered into. So I have cited to that public contract code, and the key is it has to be the same terms and conditions that Verde entered into. So you can't turn around and try to get a better price or a different service with them. It has to be the exact same service in terms and conditions. But this order form is what, if your business office or your purchasing office is asking about this, you should be able to enter into the same agreement on the same terms. I still suggest you have your board approve it and everything, but this is just the legal language that allows you to, quote, piggyback off of their contract. And then the final piece is, this is for all you school districts, is right now, this is grant funded. There's grant funding for this. And I know they will talk about that further. And we wanted to put in here that for whatever reason, if the funding doesn't come through and you're a subscriber that's not happy with the service or doesn't have the budget for the service, that it would give you the opportunity to terminate the service. We hope that doesn't happen. But again, looking out for the school districts, we want to make sure that they weren't going to be surprised with any financial obligations they weren't prepared for. So those were the key elements that we put in there. Again, I could do a deep dive on any one of those, but I will put my contact information in the chat if it's already not in here, because if any of you want to reach out to me with further follow-up questions on how to, or if your CBOs, your CTOs have questions, or your public information officers, anybody, we're happy to work with you.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. And we'll have a chance to ask Gretchen a few questions here in a moment. But next, I want to introduce Mike McCormick from Verde Unified School District, who will share a little bit about why he decided to lead this initiative from Verde. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, thanks, Corey and Marlene and Gretchen and Sal. And, it's so heartwarming to see so many folks on the program today that I feel like I've known and had great professional relationships with over the years. So super grateful. Hey, we're here to kind of ask you to join this coalition. And this kind of stuff is right up my alley. We were the first ones in the state in Val Verde several years back to have FAFSA CATA completion as a graduation requirement. And when we did that, our grad rates went up, our A through G went up, and we've led the state in FAFSA and CATA completion for many years now. And so kind of this idea of, being passionate about technology and thinking about how could we use technology to force multiply FAFSA completion and frankly, take some of the weight off the shoulders of our counselors, because a lot of the questions that are asked of counselors, there's repetition to that, right? They're fielding the same sorts of questions around the same themes over and over and over again. Could we introduce technology into the equation and allow that technology to answer many of those basic questions around the same themes? And so that's really the promise of this partnership with Mainstay, is to reduce counselor workload, the other staff, teachers in some cases that may be participating in your district-wide initiatives around FAFSA completion. We think that technology is the perfect solution for that. You know, and what I like to say about this whole process is, look, guys, we've all invested like 13 years into our students. Can we give them another hour or two? Because many of the students that we serve in our communities are the very students that if they simply complete FAFSA or CATA, they will get free money for education. The critics who are out there might say, oh, you're just trying to increase the student debt. You know, that is not the case here. In my particular district, our unduplicated count is north of 80%. We know that our students are going to receive free money for college. And kind of one of the initial aspects of the why for us, if we think about Simon Sinek and, you know, what is the why, going way back to the beginning, there remains like $500 million in California alone in unclaimed financial aid. Again, this is free money for college for students. And so part of me is, I have to say, because I feel like I'm amongst friends here, that if you all jump in on this, that means less money for the Verde kids. But I think there's enough to go around that all of our communities can benefit from this. So just most grateful for your attendance today. You know, it was said at the top, but it bears repeating. Time is finite for all of us, and really appreciate your interest and your investment of time with us on this webinar today. You heard we're all making ourselves available to answer any questions that you might have, and that'll do it. That's enough out of me. It's great to see everybody today. So I'll turn it back over to Corey.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Mike. And we've come to that point where I wanted to jump out of the presentation and just get some of your early questions answered. On this particular slide here, we have a couple of QR codes. One is an AI glossary that we've designed along with AASCU for education leaders to understand artificial intelligence a little bit deeper. And then we have an overview on the right there for our partnership overview. So you can take that with you and have another resource. But we do have a question in the Q&A. If there are others, please get those submitted. But this is from Julie. She asked a question: how do we solve the equity issue of students who don't have a cell phone? That's a question that's come up a lot during this journey, Julie, and we had to figure out what the best approach was. And what we decided to do was to provide every school with a web-based chatbot, so you don't need a phone to access help. So you can go to the website of your school or your district website, wherever it's decided to be hosted, and engage with the chatbot in that way and get your FAFSA questions answered. So thank you for bringing that question up. Are there other questions? Either our panelists want to come off mute, or perhaps attendee would like to submit a Q&A. All right, Erica, I saw your code. We will get that updated for you as quickly as we can. So in the few minutes that we've designated here, let me go ahead and ask Marlene another question. Marlene, what would be the ideal characteristics for a school district that you'd like to join this pilot, and what sort of outcomes would you like for them to strive for?
Thank you, Corey. That was one of the key drivers in why we moved into this area, is that we know that counselors and educators on the campuses have limited bandwidth and are already they're overextended in terms of helping students. And so some of the students who aren't clear about their college aspirations and maybe didn't do as well in the A through G, they're probably the ones who are kind of sitting on the sidelines and need a lot more support and information to make that decision about whether it makes sense for them to complete a FAFSA California Dream Act. So some of the groups that we thought would really benefit would be those non-A through G students who really just need to talk to someone to say, hey, did you know you don't have to only go to a four-year institution? What about a community college? What about a short-term credential? You can do that and go to college for free. All you have to do is complete the FAFSA or the California Dream Act. So we're hoping that basically this helps high schools broaden the net in terms of being able to provide information and provide little nudges to students, or else just pique their curiosity, and then they can go talk to the counselor, or they can work with a chatbot and become interested in completing the financial aid form. So that was the vision we had, that this would work hand in hand with the local school personnel, but really help broaden the reach of who they can meet with to meet the new universal requirement, and then more importantly to really, follow this mission that all students have opportunities beyond high school, and there's money to support it.
Thank you, Marlene. I see a question did come in from Jackie about the web-based chatbot. Will there be a requirement to have an active cell phone number of a parent or other to complete engagement? For the web-based bot, Jackie, there will not be a cell phone requirement. The disadvantage to that is the level of personalization that we can do, because folks that come in through the web bot, it's anonymous. If we have their cell phone number, we have a little bit of history of the other questions that they've asked. Is there any of our panelists who would like to speak more to this equity question that's come up through our journey?
Yeah, this is Mike. I'd tackle that just a little bit and say that at least in my school district, through my experiences, I think it's a fairly rare case that a kid would not have a cell phone just for safety reasons. And I think that's for a lot of parents, they know that there's a value in being able to have contact with their children. And then, you've got all the social media things going on that we, think about and deal with on a regular basis. So I think our kids are pretty well plugged in, but it was, to your point, Jackie, it was important for us to make sure that we weren't in a systematic way, not making this accessible to all students. And we didn't want the lack of a cell phone to preclude students from benefiting from this service. So I think, we've been very thoughtful about how to do an anonymous chatbot, which will still provide value for the student. And in those cases, and I would venture to say rare cases where a student does not have access to their own cell phone. It seems like, anybody born in 2000 or later has a special extension on their body. I say that as a parent, as a parent myself, that, it's just, it's become pretty darn regular for kids to have access. And again, we're thinking about students that are in their senior year of high school. Many of them will be turning 18 during that period of time. Obviously, we think the parent consent, if they're under 18, is really important to get. But we're talking about kids that are getting ready to take that next step out into life after high school. And so we're making the presumption that the majority of students will have access to a cell phone.
Thank you for adding to that, Mike. Let's jump back into the presentation, seeing no more questions here. And
I apologize. Can I ask Mike a question?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Frank Miranda Colton. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Frank.
Hey, good to see you. Did you go all in at all your high schools? I'm thinking of a possible pilot, because I have 3 comprehensive, things like that. So just thoughts on how did you implement this across the district?
Yeah, so great question, Frank. And we'll be implementing at the same time you all are implementing. And my thought on this is we're going to implement at all 4 of our high schools right out the gate. And my reasoning that I would share for that is I think this is a really good opportunity. And as a school district, I don't want to make that decision about, who gets access versus who doesn't. And working with Gretchen and F3, we kind of did the deep dive, lots of conversations back and forth, presented it to my Board of Education, approved by the Board of Education. So I feel like, there's a tremendous sense of excitement and enthusiasm about getting this into the hands of our kids.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Corey, I also just want to make sure you saw in the webinar chat screen that Dr. Camp posed a couple of questions. The first one asking if Callie will be available in different languages.
I did see that. Thank you so much, Gretchen, for pointing that out. Dr. Camp, yes, we will support multiple languages. Our chatbot will support up to 100 different languages. And once a student or parent begins their engagement with the chatbot, one of the early questions, or one of the early instructions is teaching them how to change their language. And then once that language is changed, they will receive all of their messages in their preferred language. And the folks on the other side will see the messages in their preferred language, usually English. So if it's escalated or in a live chat situation, the user will get the preferred language. So thank you for that question. And then the other question, can schools have the chatbot promote local school activities to promote FAFSA completion? Dr. Kemp, I would say not at this point. At this point, we will have focus strictly on FAFSA completion through year 1. Now, the technology does have the ability to do things like that and do proactive campaigning. And Julie, in the next segment, will talk a little bit more about how it works in our messaging. But for this particular initiative in year 1, it'll strictly be focused on FAFSA completion. I see a question, how accurate is the language? I'm not sure I understand.
Well, maybe Corey, just talk about the accuracy of these large language models that Mainstay is using to tap into for their artificial intelligence. I think that's the way I was thinking when I saw that question pop up.
Okay, and then I see a follow-up question, is it a Google level translation? Okay, let me try to speak to both of those. In terms of the language model and the way we leverage AI, we are leveraging AI to help us understand what the student is asking. What we notice is a lot of questions come in various different ways. There's slang that's used, there's emojis that are used, there's even GIFs that are used. We leverage the AI to really interpret that to make sure that we're getting the right answer back to the student. We are not generating random answers using generative AI in these cases. Now, speaking to the interpretations, when we are going language to language, that I believe we do use Google level translations on that. I can maybe find out a little more detail about that process. I know I have some help guides that explain how that process works. So I can get you that information, but thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then Julie Judd typed in, how will Verde handle families who do not opt in or any LEA? And that's where I would say, this is where you're going to rely on those existing systems. I know in Verde, we kind of try and spread the work out around FAFSA completion. So we've got certainly our counselors are a part of that, but also support staff, teachers, administrators. We even get our associated student bodies involved. We bring in Cal Soap, Cash for College workshops. So I would say this is something that's meant to create another tool in the toolbox. So if families opt out, and we may have a few families, then we would just rely on those existing systems and structures to ensure that our students get just what they need.
Thank you, Mike. Let's do a quick scan of any more questions. We definitely want to make sure we get all the questions answered. I did see someone ask if we can provide links. Yes, we will provide links and try to get those into the chat before the webinar is done.
The VR code's working now.
Okay, good. See a question from John. How will the system filter to determine a FAFSA filer versus a CADA filer?
So Corey, I'll go ahead and take that.
Okay.
John, the chatbot's going to be trained just like our regular counselors and trainers are trained. You ask questions and then they answer, and you help guide them if they aren't sure which form they should be completing. So, the student, will ask, which form should I complete? Should I complete the FAFSA or the California Dream Act? And then the chatbot will have been trained to say, well, depends on your immigration status, and ask a few questions. And that's how it would be determined. So basically, the chatbot will be trained in the exact way we train counselors and educators.
Thank you, Marlene. Keep those questions coming, because we will open up for another Q&A session near the end. But I want to make sure that we have time to have Julie really explain how this works and why it works. And Julie Delich is our VP of Content Architecture and Solutions. So Julie, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be invited here today. Thank you, Corey. So I'll dive right in on the next slide to really talking about why we know texting is the modality we like to focus on at Mainstay. When you look at this generation, I am also a parent of young adults. I relate very much to that comment before, Mike. We know that this generation is really interested in having information come to them. They don't want to have to hunt things down. They don't want to have to dig through information. They want things pushed to them because that is currently what they're experiencing in things that are marketed to them. So it's what their expectation is. They're also losing interest in downloading apps. We're seeing a lot more resistance to wanting to add something to the phone. And we know that text messages really reach people where they are. This reaches people that are in those historically resilient populations because, as Mike talked about, they're typically on their phone on social media when they do have access to that technology. We know that this is the way to reach people. Go ahead and jump then to the next slide, Corey. We'll talk a little bit more about why this works effectively. So as Corey mentioned, our technology is large language model backed artificial intelligence. So it's predicting what the person is asking and the best possible answer to support their effort. This is all research backed. We've done 9 randomized controlled trials to prove that our work is effective and drives positive behavioral outcomes. There's a new one coming. It's not published yet, but I'll give you a little hot off the presses. We did some work with the Yale Center for Behavior and Emotional Intelligence to refine the way we are choosing language in our text message and make it more emotionally intelligent. And we saw a statistically significant increase in engagement for students with just changing our language choice in the way that we're framing our messages. So that's some of the work that we do to ensure that what we're sending is robust and valuable and reaching people in a way that makes a difference for them. The other benefit is that when people ask a question, when students or parents ask a question and it's 2 a.m, they can get an answer right then at their fingertips. So it's really accessible to people on their terms where they're looking for information. And I'm moving kind of quickly because I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk about how to get started if you're interested and answer more questions. So I'm going to jump to this very last slide. This is the one that I can tend to spend a lot of time on. So I'm going to really constrain myself here. But we've put a lot of energy into making sure that we are utilizing strategies, techniques, and tools that are based on peer-reviewed literature and our own randomized controlled trials. If you love research like I do, my background is a combination of mental health and higher ed. These are the bodies of literature that we've pulled from primarily over here on the left side of the screen in order to build the content of the messaging that we send. And we've done partnerships with experts to make sure that we're gathering all of the knowledge that we can possibly gather in order to make our messages effective and reach our students and help them make positive decisions and really have the knowledge they need to have the autonomy to make a positive choice for their future. I mentioned the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. That's the study that's coming out soon. That one was really intriguing. We worked with 22 historically Black colleges and universities and had students evaluating our messages for cultural relevance, as well as an expert, as well as the Yale team. So I bring all of that up to really emphasize our commitment to making sure that we are sending messages that have that impact that we're looking to achieve. In this particular case, working with all of you to increase the FAFSA or CADA completion rates. So I'm going to make myself stop there, but feel free to ask me questions about any of the research partnerships as we continue forward. And Corey, I'll hand it back to you to talk a little bit more about what to do next if you're interested.
Yeah, thank you so much, Julie, for that. And I'm certain there's going to be some more questions for you. So the Mainstay team is going to be here to guide you through the next steps if your district is really interested in participating in this initiative. I did see a question come through that I'll address, and I think it's appropriate timing about the funding. We have been generously granted funding for the first year by Capital One Foundation. So all expenses will be covered for the districts that have been invited to participate in this pilot. So immediately following the webinar, or as soon as the recording is available, we will be following up with an email from Marlene with the recording, recap of highlights of today's overview, the slide deck, some important links for you, and contact information if you want to ask further questions. We also would like to have you, if you are interested, your district leadership, scan the QR code here. We'll include a link in the follow-up email to this interest form, so we know if you are interested. Then we can begin more in-depth follow-up with you. The form is very simple. We just ask for name, district name, primary point of contact, and then a few optional fields in there as well. So if you are interested, please do that. The next step would be meeting with the Mainstay team and our engagement specialist to really explore what onboarding would look like, what the technical and marketing support that we offer looks like to onboard your district and your schools into this initiative. While this is a statewide chatbot, it's important for us to understand your local and regional needs so that we can best serve and engage your students as well. And then we really want you to be in position to launch this fall so we can begin engaging students around things like the FSA ID, helping students get prepared, creating awareness about the forthcoming FAFSA launch at the beginning of next year. All hands on deck to get people in districts onboarded into the platform. To your right, the CSAC team has created a key resource website that is going to have all of the links that have been discussed here, the resources that have been discussed here today, for you to learn more and dive deeper into understanding what this initiative is about and what it might look like for you to participate. But if you are interested, highly encourage you to get the interest form back to us as soon as possible, and then we will follow up with you to get a meeting on the calendar to discuss how your district can participate. So with the remaining 9 minutes, let's make sure that we open up again for some questions. I do see a couple of questions. Sharon asked, only seniors or juniors as well? Right now, this is just for graduating seniors in year one. Other state partnerships do engage juniors with some more college access and career readiness work. But for this pilot, we will just focus on the juniors or seniors, I'm sorry, graduating seniors. And let's see, Dr. Hernandez-Williams, given that it's the start of the school year for districts, September 1st is a tight turnaround window. Is there a consideration for pushing the date out or having a follow-up meeting? Well, the September 1st date that I put there is just getting the interest form back. When we reach out to you, we will work with your timing to understand when it's best to begin engaging your team to consider what onboarding looks like for you. We have a question, are chatbot conversations saved and accessible by the student or family? I will say the student or family doesn't have access to the platform, but you can request your data at any point if you want your data. So yes, those conversations will be available by request.
Corey, I was just
Go
going
ahead,
to
Mike.
jump in real quick, and you're doing a masterful job on these questions. Just say to the 58 folks that are still with us here, we so appreciate you hanging in and hearing this. And I was just going to provide just a touch of context. So through my work with the College Board, I was aware of what Mainstay was doing in the higher ed space for several years. As a matter of fact, some of you that have been around a while in education, you'll remember when President Obama was in office, Michelle Obama had the Reach Higher campaign. There was two guys that were part of that, Don Yu and Eric Waldo. Both of them, after President Obama left office, they went over, they've done a couple of things, but they went over to Common App. And Mainstay was a partner with Common App, and a lot of the work that was done, that was frankly innovative work with Eric Waldo, Don Yu, the folks at Mainstay. I wanted to give you that context because in K-12, Mainstay might not be a name that you're entirely familiar with, but Mainstay has really dominated this space in higher ed and doing things on a state level, certainly with many, many colleges and universities across the nation. And then also their work with Don and Eric through the Common App. So I was feeling just a touch of anxiety there, and I wanted to give you a bit of a historical perspective on that.
Mike, this is Gretchen, and if I could piggyback on that a little bit, no pun intended. The agreement, the whole framework for this arrangement is based on the California State University's agreement with Mainstay. And what we did is we used that for the foundation, and we built in all the K-12 protections that apply both federally and in the state of California. So it's a very similar arrangement in that regard as to what the California state system has already vetted and has implemented.
Yeah, Daryl, that's a great question that you put in there.
That's a great question and kind of tough to answer. Marlene, did you see Dr. Camp's question in the chat?
He says, have there been advocacy efforts to allow a parent or school to sign up even if an LEA does not have an MOU? If this is beneficial, one may argue that this service should be available to each student, even if the LEA is not partnering. Dr. Camp, you're prophetic in your thinking, because the idea is that every student in the state of California should have access to this technology. And so I think certainly for me, my hope would be that there is some way, once we get through kind of this grant funded opportunity, and thanks to the generous partnership with Capital One Foundation, that this is something that could ultimately impact every student in the state of California.
And if I can add to that, Mike, that is precisely correct. That is the reason we're so committed to this as a statewide state agency that looks at the interests of Californians statewide. We're looking at the long game in this, and we're really so pleased with this first phase to really learn how it works and to really roll it out in a controlled fashion. I think eventually we will be able to do things to be able to add information locally to help students navigate events that help them complete their FAFSAs or their CADAs. But in the long term, I'm interested in how any Californian that would like to access financial aid can get the assistance of Cali. And because right now we're focusing on K-12 high school seniors. We of course serve many individuals who are beyond 18 years old. So we want to at some point expand it to them. And potentially in the future, if things work out the way I'm confident they will, that we will will eventually have an online portal where individuals can opt in at the statewide level. But I think from a learning standpoint, this is absolutely the best way to approach this initiative, is to work on the ground level with our trusted partners in the K-12 community and expanding K-12, and then eventually look at what it will take to expand statewide. I also want to add one more point about why we chose to work with Mainstay, because Mainstay from the very beginning created this platform to address persistent equity gaps in educational attainment. That's what got my attention. People talk about, the newest thing, the latest, greatest technology, but this is a company that is committed to and focused on bringing an equity lens to this technology. So from the very onset, we looked at partnering with Mainstay to help those students who have least access to the opportunities and perhaps are struggling with a digital divide. Cell phones is probably one of the areas where they're most connected. There are other parts of technology that they're not as well connected, but we thought we want to introduce this to students and let them know how AI can be part of their lives and using it for good purposes and not just, other ulterior motives that, people are concerned about, but that we know in the space of student support services, this is a pretty safe space for them to get introduced. We're not talking about academic curriculum, which gets more complex, or generative AI. This isn't generative AI. This is a pretty controlled effort that we're really utilizing to emphasize to all students, especially those who are most ambivalent about financial aid and going to college. So that's what excites me. That's why I'm so passionate about this initiative.
In our last couple of minutes, is there anyone else who'd like to come off mute and ask a question or post another question? If not, Marlene, I'd love to turn it over to you for final comments and wrapping us up for the day.
Thank you, Corey, Gretchen, Mike, the whole team, Sal, and all of you who participated today. You asked great questions, and we really are excited to work with you for the reason that you're going to bring important mind share to this rollout. I just urge you to, please consider, how to get started. I think there's a letter of interest that's going to be dropped in the chat that you can submit, but certainly we'll be following up. And we really are learning together. And we're learning together in a responsible way to bring more access and opportunity to our youth and all the youth that you serve. And so many of you are serving diverse and very low income students. We just think it's the perfect opportunity to leverage the technology, the latest technology, to help them access the opportunities they deserve. So I just want to thank you all. And this is an ongoing conversation. We're in this together.
Thank you, Marlene, and thank you all for joining. Again, keep an eye out for the follow-up email with all the resources that we discussed earlier, and hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you so much.